When German pilots first glimpsed the sleek silhouette of the P-51 Mustang in late 1942, they didn't yet realize they were staring at the aircraft that would eventually haunt their skies. To Luftwaffe veterans hardened by years of combat, it looked like just another Allied machine, fast, yes, but nothing they hadn't faced before. From high-altitude engagements over France to low-level sweeps across the Low Countries, German flyers had grown accustomed to a steady stream of new opponents. But this fighter was different. Its long nose, broad laminar flow wings, and uncanny balance of speed and range would soon expose the vulnerabilities of the Reich's proudest squadrons. At first, the Luftwaffe was confident. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 still patrolled Europe as the backbone of German air power, while the Focke-Wulf Fw 190 terrorized bomber formations. Against these proven predators, the Mustang seemed like a latecomer, unlikely to shift the balance. Pilots who saw it in early skirmishes often mistook it for the RAF Spitfire or a derivative of some American export fighter. Its true identity remained hidden, and with it, the storm that was about to break. By the winter of 1943, however, reports began filtering through Luftwaffe intelligence that this new Allied fighter possessed an extraordinary quality: endurance. With its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine and efficient fuel system, it could fly from England deep into the German heartland and still have power to spare for dogfights. To German strategists, this was a nightmare unfolding. For years, their survival against the relentless U.S. daylight bombing campaign depended on one fact: American fighters simply couldn't escort bombers all the way to Berlin. The Mustang shattered that rule. If you're fascinated by how machines like the P-51 rewrote history, don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow aviation fans, and subscribe so you never miss our deep dives into the world of vintage warbirds. For Luftwaffe aces such as Adolf Galland and Johannes Steinhoff, the revelation of the Mustang's true range was a shock. Their carefully planned interception tactics, based on striking bomber formations when escorts turned back, collapsed overnight. Now, swarms of P-51s stayed locked on the bombers from takeoff to target and back again. What had been a calculated chess match in the skies was suddenly a brutal fistfight where Germany's finest no longer had the upper hand. The Mustang wasn't merely a plane. It was an omen. Its very presence forced German pilots to question whether their hard-won dominance was slipping. By the time Berlin's command structure understood the scale of the threat, the skies over Europe were already beginning to change color, painted with contrails that stretched deeper and longer than the Luftwaffe had ever prepared for. By early 1944, the Luftwaffe was no longer just fighting against numbers, it was fighting against inevitability. The P-51 Mustang had turned what had once been a manageable battle into an exhausting war of attrition in the air. German intelligence files from this period reveal a growing sense of alarm. Bomber losses were declining, fighter sweeps were expanding, and Allied raids now reached the industrial lifelines of the Ruhr and Berlin with frightening regularity. The Luftwaffe's carefully orchestrated defense belts, once calibrated with precision, were suddenly riddled with gaps. What struck German commanders hardest was not just the Mustang's technical superiority but the way it reshaped Allied strategy. American bombers, particularly the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator, had long suffered appalling losses when they ventured deep into Germany. The Luftwaffe's tactic of massing fighters for head-on or slashing attacks had paid dividends. But when Mustangs began flying tight escort at altitude, peeling away only to dive at German interceptors, the bomber boxes suddenly became fortresses in truth. Reports from Luftwaffe Gruppenkommandair complained that interception runs were now suicidal when P-51s were present in strength. For the German pilots themselves, this was a cruel transformation of their daily reality. Before the Mustang, there was at least a window of opportunity: hit the bombers before the escorts arrived or after they turned back. Now, that window slammed shut. They were always there, one veteran recalled after the war: above us, behind us, waiting. No maneuver felt safe, no approach went unchallenged. The P-51 forced the Luftwaffe into defensive spirals before they could even line up a shot on the bombers. What made this worse was the Mustang's flexibility. Unlike some specialized interceptors, the P-51 could do it all: high-altitude cover, low-level strafing, even long-endurance patrols to catch retreating fighters near their home fields. German air bases in France, Belgium, and Western Germany soon became hunting grounds. Aircraft were attacked as they climbed out, sometimes even as they taxied. It was a slow bleed that no amount of courage or skill could reverse. The Reich's production lines still turned out Bf-109s and Fw-190s in large numbers, but the balance sheet was grim. Pilots were being lost faster than they could be replaced, and new recruits faced an enemy that seemed untouchable. Seasoned aces could still claim kills against the Mustang, but the effort was costly, draining both fuel and morale. Each engagement chipped away not only at the Luftwaffe's strength but at its myth of invincibility. As 1944 wore on, the German skies, once dominated by black crosses, now carried a new symbol of supremacy, the Mustang's unmistakable profile, glinting silver in the sun. Its arrival did not just challenge the Luftwaffe's tactics, it rewrote the entire script of air warfare over Europe. And with every mission it flew, the Reich's horizon drew a little darker. To the Luftwaffe's engineers and tacticians, the P-51 Mustang presented a puzzle as much as a threat. Here was an aircraft that seemed to combine the best features of several designs without their usual trade-offs. In German post-war analyses, it was often described as an interceptor with the range of a bomber and the agility of a frontline fighter. That unique combination was the heart of its power. Much of this advantage stemmed from its engine. Early Mustangs had not impressed German observers. They were fast at low altitude but lacked the high-altitude performance needed to threaten interceptors. Everything changed when the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine was paired with the Mustang's clean aerodynamic frame. Suddenly, the Allies had a fighter that could thrive at 30,000 feet, right where the Luftwaffe had long enjoyed its edge. With a top speed above 430 miles per hour and the ability to climb aggressively, the P-51 robbed German fighters of the vertical superiority they once exploited. The Mustang's range was equally devastating. Thanks to drop tanks, it could escort bombers all the way from English bases to Berlin, Leipzig, or Munich, missions of nearly 1,500 miles. German planners had assumed such distances made deep penetration raids unsustainable. Now, with Mustangs flying cover the entire way, that assumption crumbled. The Americans have found a way to erase geography, one Luftwaffe staff officer noted bitterly. Weapons added to the problem. 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns gave the Mustang both volume and reliability of fire. Against the lightly armored Bf-109 and even the sturdier Fw-190, a well-placed burst shredded control surfaces and crippled engines. Pilots also learned to exploit the P-51 stability in dives, making slashing attacks that German planes often couldn't evade. At low level, Mustangs strafed rail yards, airfields, and convoys, turning the Luftwaffe's logistical arteries into killing zones. Yet it wasn't just raw performance that unsettled Germany. The Mustang was forgiving, especially compared to the high-strung Bf-109. German test pilots who flew captured examples after the war admitted it handled smoothly across speeds and altitudes. For rookies, this meant survivability. For veterans, it meant confidence. The Luftwaffe was painfully aware that while it was feeding barely trained youths into the cockpit, the Americans were giving theirs a machine that could protect them from fatal mistakes. The Mustang's strengths forced Germany to consider desperate answers. Jet projects like the Me-262 promised salvation, but production delays and Hitler's interference crippled them. Meanwhile, stopgap improvements to the Bf-109 and Fw-190 could not match the P-51's combination of speed, range, and endurance. The Mustang had become not just another opponent but a benchmark, the aircraft by which German designs were suddenly measured and found wanting. By late 1944, Luftwaffe commanders spoke of the P-51 not as a rival to be outflown but as a barrier to be endured. Its presence was constant, its impact undeniable, and its reputation among German pilots shifted from curiosity to dread. For German fighter pilots, the war in the skies was already unforgiving by 1943. But when the P-51 Mustang began appearing in strength, the rhythm of combat changed in a way they could feel immediately. It was not simply another enemy aircraft, it was a shadow that followed them, from takeoff to landing, and its persistence became almost unbearable. Veterans of the Luftwaffe, men who had fought since the Battle of Britain, were accustomed to dueling with Spitfires or intercepting lumbering bombers. But Mustangs were something different. They appeared in tight formations, disciplined and patient, able to lurk above bomber streams and pounce at the exact moment of weakness. Pilots like Johannes Steinhoff recalled that the long-range cover changed everything. No longer could we count on catching bombers undefended. Now, every attack had to be made with the certainty of meeting escorts. The confidence of the Luftwaffe was shaken. Not just by numbers, but by the quality of opposition. What unnerved many German pilots most was the Mustang's endurance. Luftwaffe tactics often relied on timing, waiting for escorts to turn back before making their rush on bomber groups. With the P-47 and Spitfire, such windows existed. With the Mustang, they vanished. Escort cover was now present from the North Sea to the heart of Germany. They seemed never to go home, one pilot lamented after his squadron was decimated during a raid on Regensburg. Encounters with the Mustang left psychological scars. The Luftwaffe had long prided itself on elite training, but by 1944, replacement pilots were rushed into combat with minimal hours. Against seasoned American flyers in forgiving, powerful Mustangs, the imbalance was crushing. Kill ratios reflected it. Entire squadrons of Bf-109s were wiped out for only a handful of Mustang losses. German veterans remembered the sight of burning airfields, strafed relentlessly by Mustangs after escort missions ended. For many, the war seemed unwinnable from the moment the P-51s took control of the skies. Yet grudging respect grew alongside the fear. Pilots like Adolf Galland admitted that the Mustang was a superb machine, a design that achieved a rare balance between performance and practicality. Captured examples were flown in testing programs, and reports praised its stability, firepower, and remarkable range. The Luftwaffe's finest understood that they were witnessing a new standard of air superiority, one they could not counter in time. For the men in cockpits, however, admiration did little to soften reality. Each mission meant a gamble, and the Mustang tilted the odds mercilessly. It turned hunting grounds into killing fields, robbed them of sanctuary, and forced even aces to reconsider their survival. The Luftwaffe had once been Europe's predator. Now, with the Mustang above them, they felt like prey. By the end of the war, the P-51 Mustang had done more than dominate the air, it had rewritten the balance of aerial strategy. For Germany, its appearance marked a turning point from which there was no recovery. The Reichswehr machine, once fueled by air superiority, now found itself stripped of protection, its factories vulnerable, its morale crumbling. Luftwaffe commanders admitted that no tactical adjustment could undo the Mustang's reach. Wherever they sought to mass strength, the Mustang was already there. Historians often measure victory in steel and numbers, but the Mustang's legacy lay deeper, in its ability to deny hope. German industry could replace aircraft. It could not replace confidence. By 1944, bomber formations reached Berlin under constant escort, something unimaginable only a year earlier. The psychological blow was immense. A population that had been promised the impregnable fortress of the Reich could now hear Allied bombers and see their sleek guardians overhead with impunity. The Mustang was not only winning battles, it was eroding belief in victory itself. In retrospect, German reflections on the Mustang are tinged with both bitterness and admiration. Technical assessments from captured examples praised its agility, its efficient use of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, and its surprising ruggedness for a fighter of such elegance. Pilots who faced it acknowledged it as one of the finest machines of the war. Galland himself admitted that had Germany possessed such an aircraft in quantity, the skies might have looked very different. But it never did, and the Mustang's timing was decisive. The legacy also shaped the post-war world. Mustang units served as the backbone of Allied air forces well into the late 1940s, even fighting in Korea before jets replaced them. For Germany, studying the Mustang provided lessons that would influence its later aerospace engineering, though those lessons came too late to alter the outcome of World War II. For the men who flew against it, the Mustang remained unforgettable. It symbolized the relentless advance of Allied air power and the futility of resisting industrial might harnessed to innovation. Veterans of the Luftwaffe carried that memory for decades, recalling a fighter that not only outperformed them but also broke their will to fight. Today, the P-51 Mustang is celebrated worldwide as the aircraft that secured daylight dominance, allowing the Allies to strike deep into enemy territory and hasten the war's end. For Germany, however, its name will always recall a bitter truth: the day the hunter became the hunted, and the skies over Europe belonged not to the Luftwaffe, but to the Cadillac of the skies. And as with every legend, its story still soars. If you want to uncover more untold truths about the machines that changed history, stay with us, because the next revelation may be even more surprising.